The Taiping Rebellion Part 2 Aftermath and Consequences. This is the second video in this series on the Taiping Rebellion. Here is a link for the first part if you would like to watch that first. Although the fall of Nanjing in 1864 officially marked the end of the Taiping Rebellion, for many followers the fight was not over. There were still several 100,000 Taiping soldiers continuing the fight, with more than 250,000 fighting in the border regions of Jiangxi and Fujian. In August 1871, the final Taiping army under the command of Li Fuzhong was completely wiped out by government forces in the border region of Hunan, Guizhou and Guangxi. The Taiping War, however, spilled over into Vietnam with devastating effect. In 1860, Wu Lingyun, an ethnic Zhuang Taiping leader, proclaimed he was the King of Tingling on the Sino-Vietnamese border region. Dingling was destroyed during a Qing campaign in 1868. His son, Wu Yazhong, also known as Wu Kun, fled to Vietnam and was eventually killed in 1869 in Thai Nguyen by a Qing-Vietnamese coalition led by Feng Zicai. After the death of Wu Kun, his armies broke up into small marauding bandit gangs such as the Yellow Flag Army led by Huang Chongying and the Black Flag Army led by Liu Yongfu. Liu became a prominent warlord in the Vietnamese district of Upper Tonkin and went on to assist the Nguyen dynasty against the French in the Sino-French War in the 1880s. Liu later became the second and final leader of the short-lived Republic of Formosa. Other flag gangs were in existence, often armed with the latest weapons of the time, and plundered what remained of the Nanjing kingdom. They then took part in the Hor Wars against the incompetent forces of King Rama V, until when in 1890 the last of these groups disbanded. Death toll. At the time of the Taiping Rebellion, there was no reliable census, and thus the estimates of the death toll vary greatly. Most widely cited sources estimated the death toll of the 14-year-long civil war to have claimed the lives of somewhere between 20 and 30 million people, both combatants and civilians. Most of the deaths were, however, not attributed to the fighting, but to diseases such as plague and famine. With numbers of those dying through disease, famine, and the fighting, the actual number could easily have been closer to 100 million. Other rebellions that overlapped Taiping. There were several other rebellions that overlapped the Taiping Rebellion, all of which posed considerable problems for the Qing dynasty. The Nian Rebellion of 1853 until 1868 initially had no clear goals other than being critical of the Qing government. However, the Nian felt they were provoked into taking action following a series of natural disasters using the slogan, "Kill the rich and aid the poor." Occasionally, the Nian rebels collaborated with Taiping rebels, including during the Taiping's unsuccessful northern expedition. As the Taiping began to lose ground, particularly after the fall of Nanjing in 1864, numerous Taiping soldiers were incorporated into the ranks of the Nian rebels. There were several rebellions by Chinese Muslims, including in the southwest the Panthay Rebellion of 1855 until 1873, and the Dungan Revolt in the northwest from 1862 until 1877. After the failure of the Red Turban Rebellion of 1854 until 1856, and the failure to capture the city of Guangzhou, many of the fleeing soldiers made their way to Jiangxi and joined forces with the armies of Shi Dakai. Remnants of the Small Sword Society, an attempted uprising in Shanghai, regrouped with the Taiping army. Du Wenshu, the leader of the Taiping Rebellion in Hunan province, was in contact with the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom, where the Taiping War was aimed at the Han Chinese. Du Wenshu's aim was in destroying the Qing government. Du's armies were a mix of non-Muslim minorities, including Li, Bai and Hani peoples, in addition to Han Chinese. They were also assisted by other non-Muslim hill tribes, including Shan and Kashin. The Dungan Revolt, a rebellion by Chinese Muslims, was not aiming to overthrow the Qing dynasty, as its leader, Ma Hualong, had accepted an imperial title. This revolt had erupted as a result of intersectional fighting between different Muslim factions and Han Chinese. During the course of this revolt, various groups fought each other with no coherent goal in mind. In the opinion of modern researchers, the Dungan Rebellion began in 1862 not as a planned uprising, but as a consequence of local brawls and riots triggered by trivial causes. Among those causes were false rumors that the Hui Muslims were aiding the Taiping rebels, while the Hui Ma Xiaoshe further claimed that the Shanxi Muslim rebellion was connected to the Taiping. Another historian, Jonathan Spence, laid claim to the key reason the Taiping were defeated was through their inability to coordinate their rebellion with that of other rebellions occurring at that time. Policies of the Taiping. Among the social reforms announced by the leaders of the Taiping were strict separation of the sexes, abolition of foot binding, land socialization, and the suppression of private trade. The importation of opium into all Taiping territories was also banned. In their regard to religious practices, the Taiping form of Christianity replaced all Confucianism, Buddhism, and Chinese folk religion. God-worshipping, which held that Hong Xiuquan was the younger brother of Jesus Christ and the second son of Shangde. Buddhist libraries were burned, while Hong saw Confucianism as a tool of the Qing to tyrannize the Han people and a shadow of its noble origins, which resulted in the burning of Confucian libraries, while monasteries practicing Confucianism were destroyed. Confucian temples, particularly in the Yangtze Delta, were defaced or converted into places of worship for Taiping Christianity or to use as hospitals. Traditional works, such as those by Confucius, were also burned, while sellers of such items were executed. The Taiping were also opposed to any form of idolatry, destroying all idols wherever they existed. While the destruction of idols was initially welcomed by foreign missionaries, those missionaries eventually came to fear the zealotry of the Taiping that they had a hand in creating. Military. The Taiping rebels employed some unorthodox but brilliant tactics that almost toppled the Qing dynasty through what one historian called the most significant military experimentation since the 17th century. The Taiping army was the real strength of the rebellion, armed with a high level of discipline as well as fanaticism. They adopted a uniform consisting of red jackets and blue trousers and grew their hair long, resulting in their being known as long hair within China. In the beginning of the rebellion, they had large numbers of women serving in their army, with the most famous of these being Hong Chuanjiao, Su Sanliang, and Qiu Ersao. The high numbers of females within their ranks distinguished them from other armies of the 19th century, although after 1853 the numbers of women serving declined dramatically. Combat was always bloody and extremely brutal. With little artillery, the majority of their huge armies were equipped only with small arms. Casualties were high as both armies attempted to push the other off the field of battle, with few battles being decisively won. The main strategy of the Taiping armies was to take major cities, consolidate, and then hold onto those prizes. They would then march out into the surrounding countryside and attempt to recruit local farmers to join their battle against the Qing government. Estimates of the size of the Taiping army varied, but were generally believed to have been around 500,000 soldiers in 1852. Each army corps consisted of around 13,000 men and initially women. In addition to the main fighting forces, there were thousands of pro-Taiping groups fielding their own forces of soldiers. The rebels were well equipped with modern small arms. While not supported by foreign governments, they brought their equipment from foreign suppliers, often smuggled into China by British and American dealers. Manufacturing equipment was also imported, which enabled the rebels to make their own weapons. Their modern arsenal was supplemented with captured equipment, and in 1862 the supply of weapons held by the rebels was considered to have been superior to that held by the Qing government. Demographics. Ethnically, the Taiping army was at the outset formed largely from the following groups: the Hakka, a subgroup of Han Chinese; the Cantonese, local residents of Guangdong; the Zhuang, a non-Han ethnic group. The majority of the Taiping leaders were all Hakka. The Hakka, as a subgroup of Han, were frequently marginalized economically as well as politically, having migrated to the region after it had been established by Han Chinese. The Hakka settled into the poorer quality areas for farming in what is now Guangdong and parts of Guangxi. Yu Chinese speakers were already the dominant regional Han group, so the Hakka felt marginalized from the earliest times in the region. Eventually the Hakka settled throughout southern China and beyond, but mostly on the rugged, less fertile land or scattered on the fringes of Han society. The Hakka were considered migrant newcomers and subjected to hostility and derision, and as a result were often associated with popular unrest and rebellion. The other significant ethnic group in the Taiping army was the Zhuang, an indigenous people of Thai origin and the largest ethnic majority of non-Han people. Over the centuries, the Zhuang communities had adopted Han Chinese culture with the Zhuang language absorbed as another dialect of Han Chinese. Because the Han Chinese and Zhuang were integrating at different rates, there was a certain amount of friction between the two, and inevitably this led to occasional armed uprisings. Social structure. Socially and economically, the Taiping rebels were exclusively from the lowest classes. Many of them had been miners before the rebellion, particularly those coming from the Zhuang. Very few Taiping rebels, even among their leaders, came from imperial bureaucracy. Almost none of them were landlords, and in the territories they occupied, landlords were often sought out for execution. Qing forces. In opposition to the rebels was an imperial army in excess of over 1 million regular soldiers and an unknown number of thousands of regional militias, as well as foreign mercenaries in support. Among the imperial forces was the ever-victorious army, which consisted of Chinese soldiers led by a Western officer corps. One of the most famous imperial armies was Zheng Guofan's Xiang army. Another was the army of Qing General Zhuang Taiping from Hunan province. Each of these contributed greatly in suppressing the Taiping Rebellion. Although accurate record keeping was something that Imperial China did very well, the decentralized nature of this conflict and being a very chaotic civil war meant that reliable figures are now impossible to find. The destruction of the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom meant that the majority of any records it may have possessed were destroyed, with less than 10% of their records surviving. What is known is that around 90% of Taiping recruits were either killed or defected. Aside from local militias, the Qing forces were organized into the 8 Banners Army, consisting of 250,000 soldiers. The Green Standard Army had over 600,000 soldiers in 1851. The Xiang Army from Hunan had around 130,000 soldiers. Anhui's Hui Army consisted of 60 to 70,000 soldiers. while the Chu Army soldiers numbered 40,000 soldiers in 1864, and the ever-victorious army had a strength of 3,500 to 5,000 soldiers in 1862. The Taiping's relationship with the Western powers. The Taiping government maintained an ambivalent relationship with the Western powers who were active in China during that time. Due to the religious aspects of the rebellion, the Taiping government perceived Westerners as their brothers and sisters from overseas. The Taiping government proved to be especially welcoming to Western missionaries. In 1853, Hong Xiuquan invited the American missionary Isaac Jacobs Roberts to Nanjing to aid the administration of his government. Roberts did not arrive in Nanjing until 1861, met with Hong, and was commissioned as Director of Foreign Affairs. While some missionaries were enthusiastic in the early years of the Taiping Rebellion, there was also lots of Western skepticism from the rebellion's inception. According to historian Prescott Clark, Westerners in China became divided into two separate groups with regard to their views of the rebellion. One view was the rebels were nothing more than robbers gathering wealth through revolts against the Qing, while the opposite view was that the Taiping were religious fanatics provoked by skillful leaders to fight the Qing to the death. Government officials of some of the Western powers were somewhat optimistic about the Taiping's chance of victory in the early stages of the rebellion, as the enforcement of the Treaty of 1842-44 by the Qing was frustrating for the British and American officials in terms of open trade. According to the historian Eugene P. Boardman, the Christian nature of the Taiping opened up the possibility of a more cooperative trading partnership. There were numerous visits to the Taiping capital during 1863 and 1864, with American Commissioner Robert Milligan McLean even endorsing the Taiping government. However, Western missionaries changed their opinions upon further visits to the rebels, one of those being an American missionary, D.B. Bethune McCarthy, who, upon visiting Nanjing, described the situation as a dreadful destruction of life. He was critical of the practice of Christianity, claiming there were no signs of anything resembling Christianity in the city, while Hong's appointed Director of Foreign Affairs, I.J. Roberts, wrote, "His religious toleration and multiplicity of chapels turns out to be a farce, of no avail in the spread of Christianity, worse than useless." Once the Second Opium War had reached its conclusion, British Army officer Sir James Hope led an expedition to Nanjing in February 1861. This expedition was the largest party of Westerners to visit any Taiping territory. The visiting party consisted of several British military personnel, entrepreneurs, missionaries, unofficial observers, and 2 French representatives. Upon their arrival in Nanjing, some members of the expedition wrote that devastation marked our journey, in reference to the conditions they found in Taiping territories. Some reports even suggested a great deal of indiscriminate slaughter of civilians conducted by the Taiping army in those areas newly under Taiping control. Sir James Hope made a second visit to Nanjing in late 1861, hoping to come to an agreement with the Taiping rebels that they would not attack Shanghai, a proposal that was refused by the Taiping. This refusal of cooperation, followed by the rebels' occupation of Ningbo that December, led to a limited intervention against the rebellion by both the British and French. Western assistance for the Qing was also driven by the fear that a successful rebellion would lead to a stronger China, one that would be able to resist those Western powers. Total war. The Taiping Rebellion was a total war. Almost every civilian who had not fled the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom was given military training and conscripted into the army to fight against Qing imperial forces. Under the Taiping household registration system, 1 adult male from each household was to be conscripted into the army. During this conflict, both sides had tried to deprive each other of the resources which they needed in order to continue the war, and it became standard practice for each to destroy the opposing side's agricultural areas, butcher the population of cities, and generally exact a brutal price from the inhabitants of captured enemy lands in order to drastically weaken the opposition's war effort. This war was total in the sense that civilians on both sides participated in the war effort to a significant extent, and the armies on both sides waged war against both the civilian population and military forces. Contemporary accounts describe the amount of desolation which befell rural areas as a result of the conflict. In every area which they captured, the Taiping immediately exterminated the entire Manchu population. In the province of Hunan, one Qing loyalist who observed the genocidal massacres which the Taiping forces committed against the Manchus wrote that the pitiful Manchus, men, women and children, were executed by the Taiping forces. Legacy. Beyond the staggering level of human and economic devastation, the Taiping Rebellion left drastic changes within the latter period of the Qing dynasty. Power was, to a limited extent, decentralized, with ethnic Han Chinese officials more widely employed in positions of authority than they had been previously. The traditional Manchu banner armies, upon which the Qing dynasty had previously depended, had failed and were gradually replaced with gentry organized local armies. These armies had then evolved into forces used by local warlords that dominated China once the dynasty had fallen. However, some military skeptics offered a differing view, claiming that armies created to put down the Taiping Rebellion operated in a different context from those later regional armies. The Taiping example of insurgent organization, together with its mix of Christianity and radical social equality, influenced Sun Yat-sen and other future revolutionaries. Some surviving Taiping veterans joined the Revived China Society, a group of Christian members who organized the short-lived Heavenly Kingdom of the Great Ming Shun in 1903. Some Chinese historians, following the lead of Mao Zedong, characterized the rebellion as a proto-communist uprising, while both communist and nationalist commanders studied the Taiping's organization and strategy during the Chinese Civil War of the early 20th century. The American general Joseph Stilwell, who commanded Chinese soldiers during the Second Sino-Japanese War, praised Zhang Gaofan's campaigns for combining caution with daring, as well as using initiative with perseverance. Famine, disease, social disruption, and massacres led to a sharp decline in population numbers, particularly in the Yangtze Delta. This resulted in a shortage of labor for the first time in centuries, making labor relatively more valuable than land. The Qiang army used a scorched earth policy, refusing to take prisoners, which led to severe depopulation across Anhui, southern Jiangsu, northern Zhejiang, and northern Jiangxi. The landed gentry of the lower Yangtze region were reduced in numbers, and the concentration of land ownership was reduced. The defeat of the Taiping Rebellion by military forces from Hunan led to a dramatic increase in government representation from the province of Hunan and played a major role in efforts for reform. By 1865, 5 of the 8 viceroys were from Hunan, and the gentry of Hunan, based on their experiences with the Taiping, were very much more guarded against the influence of Westerners than other provinces. Only around 10% of Taiping published records survive, because they were mostly destroyed by the Qing in an attempt to rewrite the history of the conflict. Chinese interests in maintaining order recruited an elite of talent and developed military power based on farmer soldiers making use of foreign ideologies, which required translation into Chinese with some inevitable modifications within that process. The rebellion in popular culture. The Taiping Rebellion has been recorded in historical novels such as Robert Elegant's 1983 novel Mandarin, which depicts the era from the point of view of a Jewish family living in Shanghai at that time. In Flashman and the Dragon, the fictional character Harry Paget Flashman recounts his adventures during the Second Opium War, as well as the Taiping Rebellion. In Lisa C's novel Snowflower and the Secret Fan, the main character is married to a man who lives in Jintian, and the characters are caught up within the conflict. Other novels that cover the era include The 100 Secret Senses by Amy Tan, Catherine Patterson's Rebels of the Heavenly Kingdom, and the novel The Heavenly Kingdom by Li Bo is set within the Taiping capital of Nanjing. Television and film have captured the conflict in the 1988 adaptation Twilight of a Nation, a 45-episode drama series about the Taiping Rebellion, and a 2000 46-episode series simply titled The Taiping Heavenly Kingdom. The Warlords is a 2007 historical movie set in the 1860s and centers around the character General Pang Qin-Yung, who captures the cities of Suzhou and Nanjing. That brings us to the end of this video, highlighting the historical era that has helped shape China today. If you've enjoyed watching and it has shown you a little detail of life and events here in China, then your subscribing to my channel would mean a lot to me. Thank you for watching. Make sure you click on the link to the next video, and until the next time, goodbye for now.